Well, the Chinese dictatorship is not a rising power because its leaders are stupid. In fact, they're so smart they keep playing the West for suckers over global warming. I mean, global warming may be a religion in the West, but it's a handy weapon for China. They get stronger, we get weaker. Perfect deal. US President Joe Biden last night told the United Nations that the US is going to give even more money to poor countries that claim they're threatened by global warming, which of course they all will do because there's money in it.
In April, I announced the United States will double our public international financing to help developing nations tackle the climate crisis. And today, I'm proud to announce that we'll work with the Congress to double that number again, together with increased private capital and from other donors. We'll be able to meet the goal of mobilizing $100 billion to support climate action in developing nations.
Who wouldn't believe in global warming if there's $100 billion sitting there waiting for you? And yet, despite all this free money, I saw more applause in the media left, and anyway, for China's dictator for overnight promising, at the UN again, to stop giving poor countries money for cheap coal-fired power stations for reliable electricity.
China will step up support for other developing countries in developing green and low-carbon energy and will not build new coal-fired power projects abroad.
Joining me is Alan Moran from Regulation Economics, which studies the economics of green energy and is wide awake to the fraud that China is playing. Alan Moran, thank you for your time. Why is Xi Jinping being praised for saying he won't help poor countries get cheap coal-fired electricity, while China, meanwhile, right now, is building for itself more than 60 coal-fired power stations for its own electricity?
Well, that's right. I mean, there's a lot in that excerpt which is false. I mean, for example, Biden saying he's going to increase this by whenever it is, but it's 2024, it's conditional on this and conditional on that. As for China, well, China has been providing a great deal of the world's finance for coal, and presumably will continue doing so for the power stations that are under construction or which are basically a pending construction. Whatever it does, though, China certainly isn't taking a back step in terms of its own coal capacity. About half of the world's capacity for coal power stations is in China. Almost half of the new capacity under construction is in China. So, you know, basically China is maybe feeling some pressure from the Western world in cutting back in its Belt and Road Initiative, but it's been a major financier in the past. And this is partly because the sort of politically correct Western banks and indeed the UN World Bank Group won't lend for coal.
Alan,
incidentally, I might say that China is about 40 times as much coal as Australia at the present time.
Yeah, well, no, look, we're being played for fools. Alan, my next question is not really about economics, but it's about a weird ad I saw from the Australian energy market operator, which is essentially in charge of making sure our lights stay on. So you hope the very best and brightest are at that work, you know, making our electricity keep flowing. Yet the AEMO, this organisation, is actually very woke, very green, and now says it's hiring people in its Women in Energy Graduate Development Program. In fact, it is hiring only women this year, 100% female intake, no male graduate engineers this year, because the AEMO says it wants to improve its gender balance and build teams that most closely represents the communities we operate in. But don't you, Alan, think that the organisation in charge of our electricity system should focus more on getting the very best young engineers, whether they're male, female, or in between?
Well, they certainly should, but there's been a long push for having women in there. In fact, 3 of the 4 regulatory agencies are run by women. And a lot of it is due to the actions of Victorian Minister Lily D'Ambrosio. And indeed, actually, one of the interesting things is when one of the female heads wanted to appoint a male, she was told by Lily D'Ambrosio that it would be better to have somebody of diversity rather than a male as the deputy, and the head, who was female, said, "Well, as far as I'm concerned, in this industry, a 60-something-year-old male is diversity." And she was quite right. And we basically have picked the wrong people for the job, which is why we've got such a mess in our electricity industry.
I have no confidence in our electricity future with that kind of ad. Alan Moran, thank you very much for your time.